Good morning, everybody. So, welcome. I know Alison and Ian have already given you some welcoming words, but it's great to see so many of you here. Alison, you were talking about the fact that we're in the room face to face. I know that not everyone is joining us today, but the opportunity to come together physically and to have these conversations is so, so valuable. I know that lots of you have travelled really far to get here today. Some of you had really early starts. I was speaking to Kevin earlier on, who said the roads were really quiet, so he's been here since 7:30. But I also know some of you chose to travel yesterday and hopefully got a wee bit of a rest last night and a slightly longer lie and a break from the morning routine. It's not raining. I really want it to be raining when you're out of your schools in a morning like this, because then you know that you're not out at the gate and it's pouring a rain, welcoming your wee ones, but it's dry, so it's maybe not as much of a wind today, given that it's not raining wherever you've travelled from. And those of you who do know me and know me well, Greg, I'm going to tell that joke again. You heard it just last week. It was a bit like a reunion coming in this morning. Greg knows that years and years ago I stood up and said, it's so lovely to see so many former colleagues and former friends. And that got a real groan as my friends in the audience said, aye, very good. So it's lovely to see so many former colleagues and so many friends today. And you were slow, but you got it. You got there. And those of you who do know me well, I've said that a few times already, know that I take every single opportunity that I can to meet with head teachers, with aspiring head teachers, with school staff, early learning settings, so that I'm hearing directly from you. And today, this is another opportunity for me to learn beside you, to hear from you, and I'm really looking forward to that. I've been in the East since yesterday morning. I travelled through yesterday to Angus, and I'll talk a wee bit about local authority visits just shortly. But I was in Angus yesterday, visiting schools, establishments, meeting the senior team, and then I'm in Dundee today. I think we've got Craig from Angus here today. Yep. Morning, Craig. Well done. You were really paying attention earlier. I didn't get to Minifeed yesterday, but hopefully I'll get there the next time I come. And Alison, you were saying about the number of people here and being Cohort 9. I've been involved with Into Headship since its inception. So it's a proud moment for me to be here with Cohort 9. When we were developing writing, I didn't know how successful and how long running. I know that makes it sound like a Netflix miniseries, but how long running Into Headship would be. And I'm really proud that we're in Cohort 9. And there's over 260 people in Cohort 9. That must be one of the largest cohorts that we've had so far. So it's really great, and you'll hear me talk a bit more about that you're making a decision to become a head teacher, a school leader in Scotland. We really need you, and I'm delighted that you're here to do that. And actually, I should have said, I know that Ian's recording this today, and if you're not joining us today, but you're watching this on Thursday, my main points are kind of towards the end. So if you're watching online on Thursday, you could fast forward probably. The next 10 minutes is reminiscence about leadership learning, which are really interesting, I think. But if you're looking for the key messages, you could probably fast forward just to the end of this. Alison, you already said that there's participants from across all of our local authorities here. That's great. So across the whole of Scotland. I was really struck when you were saying, this is me, at that split between rural and urban. And I would have thought that urban, this is me, would have been slightly louder. And it's a reminder, I know that we're looking at rural contexts later today, but it's a reminder of the diversity of our schools and where our young people learn across the whole of Scotland. And we've also got people here from early learning and childcare, from local authorities, from Education Scotland and from universities, and Alison said that already. So I want to talk a wee bit about headship. I want to talk a wee bit about my job. Those of you in the room who know Rosa Murray used to always have a line when we worked together at the GTC when she would say, back to me. And I'm going to talk a fair bit today about my leadership learning, about my leadership journey. But while I'm talking, I want you to be thinking back to you. Because if I'm sharing some of my learning, I really want you to be reflecting this morning. What does that mean for me in my context just now, or my future context on this programme? So for all, some of it is about me. I really want in your head for this to be about you. And I want to say that at the beginning in case that's not clear as I'm talking. Alison, we're doing well with moving the slide line today. So I want to talk a wee bit about my job and about the privilege of roles. I want to talk about the privilege of headship, but I also want to talk about some of the privilege that I have in the role that I'm currently doing. I'm really loving this job. And one of the best parts of it is coming to days like this and spending time with you in your schools. And I want to just put in the record at the start of what I'm sharing this morning, that I continue every single day in every single school and setting that I visit, that I continue to be really inspired by your work, by the work that you do with your teams every single day to support Scotland's learners. And that's a dedication. And I think I want to recognise that not just me from Education Scotland, but colleagues across, from local authorities, from universities, really recognise the dedication that it takes to be an aspiring head or a new head in Scotland. And when you were thinking about coming here, driving last night or driving here today, and thinking, why am I going? What brings me here today? What gets us up in the morning? And absolutely, and we shouldn't shy away from saying that for many of you, this work will support you on a next stage in a career ladder. And it's okay to recognise that. It's okay to be ambitious and have that confidence. I'm going to talk about confidence a few times this morning, but to have that ambition, to know that you can step up into that leadership space, into that headship space, to do even more, because I think headship is about doing even more for the young people that you serve. So in all the jobs that you've done so far, you've been working, you've been serving Scotland's young people. But when you take the leap to headship, for me, that's about recognising that you can do more and bring more experience to the role for that maximum impact on Scotland's young people. And actually, in your roles, wherever you're working right now as a head teacher, that leadership, your leadership of your staff teams, your young people, and across your communities is really fundamental. And it is a fabulous role and a privilege. I started by talking about this role being a privilege, but I loved being a head teacher. I genuinely still think it's one of the best jobs that I've ever done. I remember saying that to a group of head teachers very early and into headship, and annoying lots of teachers because they were saying, is teaching not a great job? Is being a teacher not one of the best jobs? And it absolutely is. But that greater influence and sphere of influence that you have as a head, I think, is a real privilege. And it can be a real challenge. And I think me standing here saying that I loved being a head teacher, I also remember and recognise that it is a privilege, but it's also a really challenging role. So my job this morning isn't to give you a Mary Poppins slant on what headship feels like. It is really challenging. And it's why it's really, really important that we've got effective and high quality leadership across all our schools and settings. And you know I'm passionate about this programme, kind of nailed my colours to my mast in the first 5 minutes. But as a nation, I think it's really, really important that we prepare head teachers properly. It's not a job that you just learn how to do by chance. You learn a lot on the ground, but actually a focused concentration on preparing head teachers, I think, is really, really important. But headship has really changed since I was a head 20 years ago. I know, you're going, never. She doesn't look old enough. And if you're not thinking that, just think it for me a minute. Humour me. She doesn't look old enough. But it is nearly 20 years. It'll be 20 years in August since I stopped being a head teacher. And it would be really naive of me to stand in front of you and say, I know what it's like for you, because I don't. I know what it was like to be a head teacher 20 years ago. But I think I know so much has changed. Education is much more political than it was when I was a head teacher. All of the things that you know about the political landscape and education that you're engaging with, I was really removed from that as a head teacher. I was not nearly as politically aware as you are and as you need to be in these roles. And I mean that both in terms of your local political context, but also in a national political context. You're operating in really, really tight financial constraints. And that's not going to get better any time in the near future. When I was a head teacher, it felt like we had lots of spare money. We were talking last night, I was of the generation where you could spend quite willy-nilly in this term, knowing that there would always be a pocket of money coming before the end of the financial year. That meant that we had lots of spare laptops, jotters, but we were stockpiling because there was spare money. There's no spare money. And that means that we can't continue to lead as we've led previously because of those tightening financial constraints. And you're also supporting young people who are facing multiple and often complex challenges, not least the after effects of a global pandemic, a continuing cost of living crisis, which impacts most sharply on many of our young people already living in poverty. And at the risk of wallowing in nostalgia, when I was a head teacher, emails were only just being introduced. I'm going to say that again. Emails were only just being introduced as a means of communication with head teachers. And that sounds funny, but the reality of that for me was I would switch on an Orange iMac, because we were forward thinking in East Ayrshire, an Orange iMac at the end of the day, I don't know, log on, and there would maybe be 3 emails from local authority staff who were quite forward thinking in terms of email communication, and I'd be quite excited that people were sending emails. I'm so old that when Education Scotland or its predecessor were coming to visit to inspect my school, they sent it in a box. And any resources came in a monthly shiny envelope from Learning and Teaching Scotland. You're nodding, you can't be that old. So that constant stream of communication that you're faced with in email simply didn't exist. And I think for head teachers, and I'll come back to prioritising, that email traffic barrage translates as another competing priority for you. You could sit behind a desk for 8 hours a day clearing emails, and the emails would still keep coming. So I'll talk a wee bit later about where we focus our time and where we prioritise our time. So definitely a privilege, but recognising the challenges. I want to talk a wee bit about my learning in education. And you know, I was speaking to someone just at the coffee. It's almost a year since I took up the interim chief exec role, just at the end of last March. And I've joked, I was speaking to Ades recently, and I joked that this is me a year ago. I looked 40 years younger. I'm a stone heavier because every time I visit a school, people feed me all cakes and biscuits. So this is what I looked like before I took up this job. But I want to recognise this morning, seriously, that it's been another really steep learning curve for me. And a number of you will be in interim headship roles, will be looking to step up into a role, or will have taken on new roles just recently. And every step in my career has been a steep learning curve. And I think that's good. If I'm advocating that learning is really important for us as a profession, then I need to be on that same learning curve. And as I said earlier, as I'm talking and I'm reflecting on my own learning, I'm hoping it helps you reflect on yours when I talk about what I'm holding firm to, what I need to know, and things that I'm prioritising. And spoiler, it's not emails. And I'll come back to that. So stepping into any new leadership role is scary, but we were talking last night, and exciting. So not talking about being scared or nervous, but talking about being excited when we step into these new roles. And Professor Christine Ford, who many of you will know really well from Glasgow University, used to talk about the learning on a programme like this, setting you up for when you finally sit on the big chair. She always talked about headship as sitting on the big chair. So actually, in Scottish education, I've probably got one of the biggest chairs that you can get. So that was a really steep learning curve to help me step into this big chair. So what have my biggest learnings been this year? And really importantly, firstly, holding firm to what gets me up in the morning. And what gets me up in the morning is a commitment that I've had for 33 years to Scotland's young people. And sometimes, some days, this job feels quite far removed from Scotland's young people. And I have to remind myself that what we are doing, and I'll talk a wee bit more about the work in Education Scotland, has to be about supporting you to support Scotland's young people. So holding really firm to that, and often in a new role, step into a new headship role, sometimes you get caught up in this stuff and we lose sight sometimes briefly of why we get up in the morning. So I've been holding really firm to that, and also to my leadership values that I think have defined me in all of these roles. Authenticity. So I don't think, my colleagues will tell you if I'm getting this wrong, I don't think I've become something different having stepped into this role. I think I'm still Gillian. In fact, we were joking about, Graham was saying, am I still Graham Hutton? We were joking about that just earlier. I don't think this role is making me change in how I lead and how I work with people. Holding on to integrity. Making decisions that are the right decisions for the right reasons for the right people. And that has to be Scotland's learners. So holding on to those values and a commitment to social justice. So I talked earlier about some of the challenges that we're all facing. It's never been more important that we get it right for every single young person in Scotland. If you think back to the national discussion from Carol Campbell and Alma Harris, they said that Scottish education gets it right for lots of young people, but not for every young person. So that righteous indignation that we should all hold around what we can do to maximise that for every young person. I've also been reminded how important it is to prioritise relationships with my own leadership team, with teams across Education Scotland, and with all those we work with and for. And it takes time. Relationships take time. But if relationships are one of your biggest priorities, come back to where emails sit. I'm keeping coming back to how we choose to spend our time. Then actually that time you spend on relationships, the time that I've spent in relationships, is time really well spent. Greg and Graham will be wishing they weren't in the room because I just keep picking on them. But one of the things that Greg and I reflected on during COVID, when we were all having to work really quickly to turn national guidance round almost overnight, one of the things that I had to pull on then more than ever before was relationships that I'd built over many years in the system. I was able to call the professional associations at tea time on a Thursday night and say, could you all come together tonight? And they all said, yes. So actually, prioritising relationships in all of our roles is really important. We always talk about having more time. Nobody's given us more time. Time's finite, but it's how we choose to spend it. And actually, my PA will be raging. So I left the house yesterday morning sharp to drive to Angus. I've not looked at my emails. I'm sure there's stuff in there that's really urgent and really important. I knew if I looked this morning, then there would be stuff that would be stuck in my head that would take me away from being present in the room with you. So prioritising those relationships is really, really important for me. And if there's something really urgent for you in your role, they'll find another way to get you. Pick up the phone. So how are you choosing to spend your time? What are you prioritising? The importance of a clear vision and sharing it collaboratively, not me sitting in a room deciding what we're going to do as an organisation and telling people, but developing that collectively as a team. How are you doing that with your teams where you're currently working? And if you're not already ahead, thinking about how will you do that when you step into that big chair. But also not underestimating the benefit of experience. And why I've got my career history behind me is that it's okay to acknowledge, again, quoting Christine, she'll be delighted. Christine talked a lot about tacit knowledge, the knowledge that we've all learned over many years in different jobs and the knowledge that we hold. So one of the things that I've realised in this job is that I can draw extensively, and my goodness, I've really had to, on the technical, the managerial knowledge that I've built in previous roles, which gives me the confidence to do this one. And I'm going to talk about confidence. I know I've said that a couple of times, but I'm going to come back to confidence as a nation. And one of the stories of this past year, in the first couple of weeks when I took on this role, I would waken up in the morning, and I know Ian's filming me, so I won't swear, but I did swear when I woke up in the morning. But I would waken up in the morning and I would say to myself, oh, I'm in charge of Education Scotland. And that felt big. But what I've realised in a year is that I might have that job title that's on the screen, but I'm not doing this on my own. And it really feels, I know this is going to sound a bit corny, but it really feels that I've got a team behind me, and that team's Education Scotland, but I've got a profession behind me who really want this to work for the benefit of all our young people. So that scary wake-up bit in the morning doesn't feel so scary anymore, because that relationship piece means that I'm not doing it on my own. And a reminder, I'm talking about me, but what does that feel like in your context right now? If it feels that the next step or the recent step feels really big, how do you make sure that you're not doing it on your own? And what do you prioritise to make sure that's the case? So talking about relationships, when I took up this job, I committed to get out there and really engage and enhance our relationships with our stakeholders. They weren't as good as they could be, and that's a real priority for me in this job. And I think we're already seeing better collaboration with the system and some really good success stories of really strong partnership working. And hopefully local authority colleagues and professional association colleagues in the room are starting to see the impact of that. We're trying really hard not to be an organisation that's top down that sends out stuff. You don't need more stuff. But we're trying really hard that when we're changing, that when we're developing work, I know I've got some curriculum team colleagues here, our curriculum colleagues are doing that in partnership with teachers across the whole of Scotland. They're not in a room, in a building, writing stuff and sending it out to you. So we're trying really hard to make that engagement different. And I talked a wee bit earlier about making a commitment to visit, I've changed my language. I made a commitment to visit every local authority in the course of this year, which was stupid. And I said it in front of ADES. So not only did I make the commitment, but I said it to every Director of Education in Scotland. And ADES have been amazingly supportive, but 32 was too ambitious. So again, my learning, what I should have said, and you'll hear my language changing, I'll visit as many local authorities as possible this year. So when you're setting out your early commitments, be ambitious, but don't make them so ambitious that you'll kill yourself trying to achieve them. And I think saying every local authority, I'm owning that one, was too ambitious. But as I say, I'm out and about all the time. If you follow me on social media, you'll see that I'm across Scotland, in schools, in early learning centres, meeting senior staff, as I said earlier. But I was joking with Anne last night, is nobody learning inside anymore? See if one more local authority messaged me and says, bring your wellies. But seriously, that means that I'm out where young people are learning. I'll tell you, if I've got time to tell, I think I might have a really funny story. Anne, sorry. But the people I know are thinking, oh my goodness. Because I was in Argyll and Bute where Anne used to work, and Wendy and Jen said, bring your wellies. So I was in this fabulous outdoor learning nursery, Silver Birch, it's called. Amazing staff, amazing young people. And I was speaking to this wee girl, not Chrissy's wee girl, because she was there while I was visiting. I was speaking to this wee girl, and she said, I go to 2 nurseries. And the head teacher had said there's a lot of split placements. A lot of parents are choosing 3 days here, 2 days in another setting. So she said, I go to 2 nurseries. And I said, do you? What one's your favourite? She said, the other one, you get soaking here. And I know how she feels every time I pack my wellies into my boot. But and I know that it's a great story. But I'm hearing every week from our learners, from our young people, from you, from your staff, and they're telling me what it's like to be learning and to be working in Scottish education. And coming back to that priority piece, that commitment that I made means that I can't be sitting behind that desk in an office being a bureaucrat, and that would be a rubbish job. But if I'm prioritising that engagement, I'm hearing from you right now what it feels to be doing these jobs, what's working really well, and what are the biggest challenges. And again, in your role, how will you split your time across your school, your setting, so that you're hearing directly from your teachers, from your young people, from your wider staff team? Because if you're only hearing from them in a formal monthly conversation, what are you missing? When are you putting your wellies on and having those informal conversations? And that wasn't a literal put your wellies on, but when are you putting your wellies on and having those conversations across your staff teams? And on these visits, what am I seeing and what am I hearing? What I'm not seeing is some of the rhetoric we see in the media and social media that criticises our education system, and often from out with, good Scottish word, from out with our education system, people looking in and saying, well, they've got that wrong and that bit's not working. What I do see on a daily basis is a passion, a commitment, an energy, and that righteous indignation that I spoke about earlier, that your young people deserve the very best that we can provide. I'm seeing schools and local authority leaders increasingly using data, going back to my headship time, much better and much more strategically than I ever used data as a head teacher to make your leadership decisions. I'm seeing a really quick interest, a growing interest in the role of the curriculum in meeting some of the wider challenges. So getting our curriculum right, getting our learning right, but also in some of the conversations that we're hearing about behaviour and attendance, some really innovative approaches to address some of those really sharp challenges. And I'm hearing, so I said I'm not going to give you a Mary Poppins, because what I do hear from you, from your colleagues and counterparts across the country, is a real worry about the increasing challenges that some of our young people with additional support needs are facing, and how we best meet those needs. Back to that comment about how we get it right for every single one of our learners, and also hearing about challenges with the behaviour of some children and attendance. But I'm not hearing people wringing hands and saying this is awful. What I am hearing is the strategies and approaches that people are taking, not only in schools, but with wider services to try and address some of those sharp challenges that I'm hearing about. And also, I've mentioned a couple of times, but also the impact of budget cuts across the country. And that's really helpful. So it's interesting, but it's also really helpful when I'm back in meetings in Education Scotland, when I'm in meetings with Scottish Government colleagues and ministers, to be able to say, I was speaking to a head teacher just on Tuesday who was telling me, when I was visiting Angus on Monday, I was hearing. So for me, that commitment to relationships has meant that my intelligence, my data is live. It's almost like a live data feed of the temperature in your schools and in your classrooms and settings. And to misquote those, again, those who know me well, I'm giving too many of my secrets away. I'm a massive musical theatre fan. And to misquote Oklahoma, I'm also a chief executive who just can't say no. Because as well as all these formal visits that we've arranged over the course of the year, I'm really lucky in that folks say to me, we're doing this, do you want to come and see it? We're having a concert, do you want to come? And I probably say, so again, leadership learning, I probably say yes far too often, which gives me no space. My whole life looks like a work diary because somebody says, would you like to come to this on Thursday night? I say, oh, that sounds lovely, of course I'd love to come. And then I realise that actually I'm not at home that whole week because of work. So sometimes my learning in that is that sometimes you have to say no. And I think in your roles, it's all too easy to say yes to too much. And I think, again, we were talking a wee bit about this last night. If you transfer that saying no, are you trying to do too much in your school and setting right now? Is there a sense that you feel that you have to cover everything? You have to keep all these plates going at the same time? I'm going to talk a wee bit in a minute about your context, but think about the work, the focus, the priorities that your young people and your teams need right now. And don't be scared to say, right now we can't look at that. We might come to that next year, but right now our focus is this. And I was in a school just recently where a head teacher had made an unapologetic commitment to a sharp focus on learning and teaching and additional support needs. She was heading up the learning and teaching aspect, the deputy was heading up additional support needs, and those were the two priority areas of focus for that school that year. So the confidence to know what was right in that setting and to then be able to recognise the impact of saying no. However, if you are having a wee school show or you're doing something really interesting, please let me know, because I do genuinely love to come along. See, I haven't learned that bit in terms of lessons. And all those visits are really helping me to understand, as I said, where we are, but also how then Education Scotland as a national body support the profession. What do we need to be doing more of? What do we need to be doing less of? And what do we need to be saying no to? So the things that I'm saying to you in your context are the questions that we're asking ourselves right now. And our young people, your young people, educators across Scotland and our communities are looking to us to be the change and to be the advocates for the change that we all want. And from our perspective, we're still waiting final decisions for the new independent inspectorate and the role of the new education agency. But what we've not done, and what I've not done, is been a caretaker. So if you're in an acting role or an interim role, what does that mean for you? In your role right now, are you waiting for the outcomes of decisions? Are you waiting for the outcomes of reform? Or are you confident to make the changes that your school, that your community need right now? Because those are the questions that we're wrestling with as an organisation. And I think that we all need to see education reform as a collective piece, as a collective endeavour, and not to be the passive recipients of change. Don't be waiting in your school or your setting for the outcomes. We need to be the change. I know it's an old adage, but we need to be the change that we want to see in the Scottish education system. We've all got a role. I've got a role. Our teams have got a role. You've got a role in leading from where we are to build a much more connected and collaborative education system which works for everyone. And I've talked about working for every learner, but it has to work for every educator, because that's where we have the impact. And I see hot off the press that Chris Chapman and Graham Donaldson have published a new paper. I was reading it this morning, looking at education reform, and they're talking about, it's a bit of a no-brainer, sorry Graham and Chris, they're advocating that teachers should be leading education reform. Of course we should. Who else? If not teachers, if not educators, who? And what Chris and Graham are saying, not waiting for the top down, because actually if teachers and school leaders don't have ownership of the change, as a profession, we're masters at ignoring change that we don't own and that we can't lead. So actually that's a challenge for me, but it's a challenge to all of you in the room. So over the past year, as I said, I've been making decisions based on those engagements about how Education Scotland needs to transition to new ways of working. And that means that for us as an organisation, we've got to ultimately be making sure that we're supporting you as best we can be so that you can support those learners. And talking about leading change, I know that at the same time as I'm talking about leading this change, that I think your word, Alison, was knee-deep in the Strategic Change Initiative, so you're right in the middle of that right now. And that's a key component of the Into-Headship programme. And again, question back to you is about, as you're learning and what the impact of your learning might be, will be, what we're going to do with that. Because interestingly, when you look at the graph behind me, so when I was telling you what I was picking up from the system, what people are telling me are the current challenges, key themes, it's no surprise, but some of the highest priority areas that you're looking at in terms of your change are additional support needs, inclusion, behaviour, curriculum innovation. So all those things that head teachers are telling me, you're looking at as part of your strategic change initiatives. So that tells me that when you're thinking about your wicked issues, what are the itches that are worrying you, it's the same themes that I'm talking about this morning. So I was delighted to see that when the team were sharing. But a question for me is what you do with the learning at the end of your strategic change initiative. How can you use that to continue to shape practice in your context, locally and nationally? And a question then is, what will you do with it at the end? Will you hand it into the university and file it away? Or will you think really differently and proactively about how you get the learning out of your head, out of the group's head, but out into the system of what you think needs to happen in these key themes? And that's something, when I was preparing for today, I was thinking I need to talk further with the team to think through how we make sure that we maximise your learning and that we make space for you to share that learning more widely than in your cohort and in your network. So, back to me and back to you in terms of our leadership messages, because I know that these are some of the key themes that you are capturing throughout the programme. Knowing and understanding who we are as leaders, and I've talked already about what we are, who we are, what we are, for what purpose. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about just a wee bit today is imposter syndrome, when I'm talking about how we lead our own learning, and when I was talking back about my career. I've spent a career with massive imposter syndrome, and I bet you have as well. Quick show of hands, in fact, quick show of hands if you don't think you've suffered from imposter syndrome at some time in your career. That was nearly a hand. You thought about it, it was nearly a hand. But not many hands. And actually, one of the things that I've learned over my career is, if not me, who? If not you, who? We spend too much of our careers. I was, again, conversation last night over dinner, you can imagine, was quite long. But I think it's only now that I can stand up and be quite confident in saying that I'm confident to do this job. I think in every job over my career that I've stepped up into, I've thought, I'm not sure I can do this job. Do they know that I'm just a wee lassie for Stewarton? And I've done it every time I've changed jobs. And I've fought against it. And actually, I'm raging at that, if I'm really honest with you. So I'll be 56 in October. I'm hoping I can retire at 60, pension dependent. To be 4 years away from when I might retire, to finally be able to say I'm confident enough to say that I know how to do this job. It's probably a kiss of death for this job, actually, saying it. But I think for us as a nation, that's quite common. You know how to do these jobs. You're investing a considerable amount of time and energy in your learning to do this job. So my urge to you is to be confident and to say, yeah, I know how to be a head teacher. I've done the learning. I'm doing it in practice. I'll always be learning, but I'm confident that I can do this job. Because actually, the good news is, if I've got to this age with nobody finding me out, because that's what we think with imposter syndrome, they'll find me out in this job. If I've got to this age and that's not happened, it's going to be the same for you. Because they can't, that sounds really bad, they can't find us out. That's not the phrase I was looking for. But actually, we know how to do our jobs. We're experienced education professionals, and we have to own the confidence to do that. But I will tell you a really quick, funny story about when I got the chief exec's job at Scale, which I was really excited about. And I knew that I wanted, it was a dream job for me. I was so passionate, I'm so passionate about professional learning, leadership. It was my dream job. I knew that stuff. But I realised on appointment that I didn't have a clue how to be a chief executive. And Tess were trying to phone me, Henry Hepburn, who many of you will know, was phoning me to try and interview me. And I was thinking, actually, I don't know what I'm going to say to him. I don't know how to do this job. Oh my God, what am I going to do? So I did what true leaders do. I turned my phone off and I went to the pictures. And I sat in the pictures and thought, oh God, right, okay. And those of you who years ago did critical skills training, one of the phrases was chunk the challenge. Bruce Henry, I've just spotted you in the audience. You did critical skills training. Chunk the challenge was a phrase that we used a lot there. And actually, in the cinema with my phone off, I thought, you just need to chunk this challenge. You need to break it up and you need to learn it a bit at a time. You need to learn how to be a chief executive. And there wasn't a leadership programme for me, like there's a leadership programme for you, stepping up into headship. So actually, chunking the challenge and doing it bit by bit. There's a great book, it's an old book now, but as a head teacher, it was one of my books that I kept going back to, that What's Worth Fighting For in Headship, Michael Fullan, and there's been a number of editions of that book. And that was a really good book for me. What were the things that I was prioritising that was worth fighting for as a new head teacher? Also, being able to self-reflect, because one of my learnings is the higher up you go, so when you become a head teacher, it's sometimes much less regular that people will give you challenging feedback. People will tell you when you're doing a good job. People will tell you, this is good, this is great. But if they're really annoyed about a decision you've made or something you've done, the more senior your role becomes, often people are less willing to give you that honest feedback. So where do you get your honest feedback from right from the outset? Who are your trusted folk who will say, you've got this one wrong, you're not reading the mood of the team? Where do you get that feedback from? PLL team are great in telling me some of the feedback. Have you thought about this? Think this bit through a bit differently. But actually, where do you get the time to self-reflect and where do you get your honest feedback? You're doing this already, but that culture of learning, if you want your young people to be learners and to be active learners, you need your staff to be demonstrating that too, and you need to be demonstrating it. So my kind of honest sharing this morning about my continued learning, how are you going to demonstrate that to your staff? Because one of the things that often happens when you become a head teacher is that they think you know all the answers straight from the first minute. I was a head teacher of the school that I was a pupil at. So 3 of the staff had taught me as a pupil in primary school. And when I got the job, one of the members of staff came like on day 1 and said, Gillian, what do you want me to do about all this? And I remember thinking, you're having a laugh. You taught me, and you think, but she did. She thought I knew the answers because I was sitting in that big chair. She thought that because I was in that role, I would know all the answers. And I think, reflecting back, I think sometimes I pretended that I knew the answers when I didn't. And it's okay if you don't know the answer to say, I don't know, let me get back to you. Let me check with someone who does know that. You don't need to know all the answers. And I've talked a lot this morning about experience and confidence to be leading in your context. You know it better than anybody else. I can't stand here this morning and tell you how to lead your school because you're the person who knows best in your own context. So use that confidence and knowledge to make the decisions that you know are the right ones. Oops. It's okay, that's fine. I'll just, the slides are there. The slides are just, that's fine. Okay, so just before I finish, I just want to talk a wee bit about, I'm going to skip over that one, about the constants. So I talked earlier about knowing, about having had having the privilege to speak to almost all of the into headship cohorts. And I make no apologies for using this slide every single time. So I've talked a lot about change, uncertainty, reform, leadership. For me, these have been my constant through that leadership journey that I talked about. It's no surprise that when I told you earlier on, if you're still paying attention, I told you earlier on about the things that have been really important to me in this role. These are the things that have been really important to me in every single leadership role. These are the things that I think are really important for head teachers in Scotland. That never forgetting why we're doing it, the prioritising of relationships, a clear vision that you're building collectively, holding tight to your values, trust, integrity, authenticity, making sure that you're not trying to do everything, that actually with your teams, you're not the person that needs to do all the work. How do you delegate? And however you delegate now, double it and triple it. Because that's how, as a team, we drive the change that we want to make. And of course, you can do all of those, but if we don't have the technical knowledge and the skills that are supporting us in those roles, then actually we're not going to be able to close that leadership circle of skill set. But before I finish, and I know I've gone just a wee bit over time, I want to talk about you. I started by talking about, by saying, this is about me, my leadership journey, want you to apply it to you. But I also started by saying, thank you for you stepping up into this space and into these roles. We really need excellent leaders in Scottish education. We need fabulous head teachers, but we don't need exhausted head teachers. And that's really, really important. I could be doing this job 24 hours of a day, 7 days a week, and those emails would still be coming. So one of the things that I've learned, and it's taken me a long time, and I can't look Greg in the eye when I'm saying this, when I'm saying it like I know it, because Greg actually has been really supportive with me over many years, saying, when are you switching off? Have you got a break planned? When's your holiday? Because he recognises, and you should actually, as a General Secretary of an association for head teachers, recognises the importance of work-life balance and switching off. And my big advice to you is, at this juncture in your career, make sure that you're really actively thinking about how you make that a priority. So we were talking about Brian Boyd last night. I'm almost as bad as Brian Boyd with Chris, but I spend a lot of time with my son Stephen. He lives in London, and I make sure that I visit Stephen, or he comes up about every 6 weeks, and we spend time together. I've got great groups of friends, and that's us climbing Goat Fell, and I just thought I would show you that one because we climbed Goat Fell. And that's us drinking wine in the bar the night before, which probably wasn't the best planning in terms of work-life balance. And that's my new great niece. So spending time with friends, spending time with family, going to the theatre, running a bubble bath, whatever works for you. Even if you need to plan it in as a diary entry, and I'm not joking about that, because see, if you don't build in the time for yourself, nobody will build it in for you. I've got a good friend who a number of people in the room know, who blocks out time in her diary, and she just writes appointment. And she says, I can't do that. I've got an appointment. And it's an appointment with herself. So where are you making the appointments for yourself so that you're best able to do these jobs? Because, and I'm such a creature of habit, to get the best of you, our young people don't need the exhausted you. So how do you make sure that you're not the exhausted you? Thank you.